Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report. The partisan political divide grew a bit wider last week.
One would think that if you're doing such a letter and making such references, you would first check your emails to see whether or not the documents were received, or at least call the Clerk of Parliament to find out whether or not the documents were circulated. But no, to create a show, they simply went on and published this letter, stayed away from the Parliament to make it look as if we're doing something in the dark.
Even though my dear colleague, leader of government business, said they gave us 7 clear days notice, what it said to us is, this is the date, sit down and wait until you get your document and be prepared to present yourself. So it did not give us the opportunity or the right. It did not give us the right to exercise that duty to participate fully in the Parliament. And that is the crux of the matter.
The issue at hand was government's decision to reschedule the crucial Finance Committee meeting, traditionally held to flesh out the estimates of revenue and expenditure before Budget Day.
Each of us volunteered for the job of being a member of Parliament. The Parliament is the highest institution in the land. It is the law-making body in the state of Grenada. And so when parliamentary calendars are scheduled, as parliamentarians, short of sickness or death, it is our fundamental obligation to make sure that we can attend Parliament. And so if we choose to absent ourselves, that's on us. It has nothing to do with the scheduling of Parliament. There's actually no obligation on us as the government to consult with the opposition in the scheduling. And notwithstanding that, we have, when it is convenient, accommodated prior requests by them to reschedule the sittings of Parliament to accommodate their schedule.
The leader of government business seemed to have, it appears, little power. Because he makes a decision with our member, and then someone comes up, the big boss comes up, and he announces a new date for budget. Are we supposed to listen to him or listen to what the consultative process lead us to be?
Does the parliamentary standing orders dictate the best by date for the Finance Committee meeting? Or is this the case of the chickens coming home to roost for the current opposition, who received an earful from Tobias Clement about receiving the estimates of revenue and expenditure later than was expected, preventing him from preparing a robust rebuttal in the previous budget debates? Joining our panel this week to discuss the function and purpose of the Finance Committee are Oliver Joseph, former MP and Business Development Minister, as well as a former Permanent Secretary in Grenada; Nazim Burke, former Finance Minister in the 2008 to 2013 NDC administration; and Kenny Lal Singh, former President of the Grenada Senate. Later on our program, we will sit with Alan Chastanet, St. Lucia's current leader of the opposition and former Prime Minister, whose patriotism and commitment to country came under the microscope at the St. Lucia Labour Party's Delegates Conference last week, in which Grenada's Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell took a jab at Chastanet for his, quote, product of Canada, unquote, comments in September 2020.
I could have lived in Canada too, you know. But I chose Grenada.
I'm a product of Canada. I did my high school in Canada. I did my university in Canada. Both my kids go to school in Canada.
The local political debate in St. Lucia is not the issue here. The issue is whether or not the Prime Minister of a foreign country should be weighing in on the internal politics of another Caribbean country. Our editorial this week is titled, When Someone Shows You Who They Are, Believe Them the First Time: The Caribbean's Long Way to LGBTQ Tolerance. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now, we will be airing the editorial later in the program because we do want to respect the time and the schedule of our guests who are joining us this morning. And I'm happy to be joined by Mr. Nazim Burke, who is Grenada's former finance minister and a former member of parliament for the St. George Northeast constituency. He actually served 2 terms in that constituency, and also by another member of parliament and a former minister for business development, who incidentally I learned this morning worked under the tutelage of Mr. Burke, who was then permanent secretary in the permanent secretary. Yes. So, Mr. Joseph, you'll tell us about that. And you were also the former MP for the constituency of St. David, and another former parliamentarian, Mr. Kenny Lal Singh, former MP for the St. Patrick West constituency. But Mr. Lal Singh is here in another capacity. Mr. Lal Singh is here because he administered the work of the parliament by way of his function as the president of the Senate. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's good to see you. And Kenny, it's good to see you. A long time I haven't seen you.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Oliver.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Joseph, on background in the green room, you were talking about the fact that Mr. Burke was your first boss in government. Talk about that relationship. I don't think Grenadians know about that.
No, it was not made public, but for the people who worked in trade with me at the time, they all know that.
Okay.
When I had an interest in the Ministry of Trade, in fact, Mr. Nazim Burke interviewed a few of us and selected me for the job. So I cannot forget that. And I worked with him, and then, 83, the revolution came to an end.
Mm-hmm.
So I was for 1 year, and when I learned that he was an economist, that kind of spurred me to do economics for my first degree. And then my interest in trade came about because I worked there, and that's why I did my master's degree in international trade, because I got to love the area. And I must say, Mr. Burke set some very high standard in the ministry. I don't know if you remember me and Chester Kado when we came in together. He said, in order to hold the position of a trade officer or simply a price control inspector for that matter, you must have full subject with English. Well, that excluded everybody else except me and Chester, because who you had there was guys that Gary brought in to be price control inspector. That was going around, and you didn't need any qualification. And he set a very high bar. Of course, Chester and I, we were very happy that he set the bar so high, so we know that we are getting quality people. So I always remember him for that. He was a very good permanent secretary.
Mr. Burke, some accolades there. It appeared that you influenced Mr. Joseph's trajectory. It's always good, given how partisan Grenada is and how divided we can be. It's good to see that we can have those conversations around people who were able to inspire people in spite of what the politics says. Mr. Burke?
Yes, well, I do agree with your thoughts, your sentiment on this. At the end of the day, we all Grenadian people. And I think we all want to see Grenada advance, Grenada develop into a wealthy, strong, respectable country. And wherever we can find ways to collaborate, to work together, to make good things happen for Grenada, we must do so. And we must have the courage, regardless of political thinking, we must have the courage that when somebody does something that is good, regardless of the political stripe that they may bear, we must commend them. And when we must also have the courage that when somebody does something that is wrong, even if it's an ally, a political ally, we must also bring it to their attention. It does not mean making public spats one way or another, but have the courage to quietly say, look, I think this is good, or I think this is not good. So I welcome that sentiment. And thank you very much, Oliver, for your vote of confidence. I've always felt that at the end of the day, standards are really what matters in work. You must be able to expect high standards of yourself and perform at a very high level in order for you to be really successful and respected. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that very warm-hearted opening salvo there. Very important that we able to have those conversations as well. Now, gentlemen, I've assembled the three of you here to talk about a series of developments that occurred last week in respect of the finance committee and the functioning and the role of the finance committee with respect to framing what the estimates of revenue and expenditure would look like. Now, I want to begin this conversation with Mr. Kenny Lal Singh, who served as the president of the Senate. Now, Mr. Kenny Lal Singh, talk to us about the standing orders, the parliamentary standing orders. What role does the standing orders play in determining how the finance committee meetings should be scheduled, when it should be scheduled, and the significance of the finance committee in respect of the overall functioning of the parliament as a legislative body? Yes, Mr. Larson, go ahead.
I am not quite sure. I haven't read it in a while, the standing orders for Parliament. But it is my firm belief that the Finance Committee is very, very important. But I believe that every government have treated the Finance Committee as a rubber stamp. I firmly believe that there should be adequate time agreed by both sides to bring the document to the Finance Committee for approval. But I can't remember any government bringing it for discussion, and if there are changes, you don't have enough time to make the changes. So really and truly, from back 1984 to now, I see the manipulation, and we treat it as a rubber stamp. You come, you listen, and I've been there for 3 terms. You come to the Finance Committee, you listen, you talk, nothing changes because the numbers are on the government side. It's approved whether you like it or not, and it goes to Parliament. I need to look up to see what the standing orders take, because I believe a government have many months to prepare a budget. So the Finance Committee should get a document like 60 days ahead. The Finance Committee should study it. And if the argument is put forward properly, there can be changes in the document. But when you come 3 or 4 days, 5 days before, obviously there can be no changes. So in my opinion, all governments I've known have treated the Finance Committee as a rubber stamp.
Absolutely. So what you're saying here is that the legislative arm, and we talk about the importance of the legislative arm in respect of being a check on the other branches of government. But what I hear you saying here is that aspect of the functioning of the legislative arm has not been doing that job in respect of the Finance Committee. So let us bring in Mr. Burke and Mr. Joseph again. Both of you gentlemen not only served as parliamentarians, but you also served in the Ministry of Finance. Do you agree with the way that Mr. Lal Singh set up this conversation here in respect of how the executive arm of government has treated the Finance Committee and the legislative branch of government? Mr. Burke, I will start with you.
Well, Kellen, I would like to start with the constitutional arrangement, because I do believe that it's important for us, in order not to confuse anyone, to set the context in which this is happening. The Constitution, as we all know, is the supreme law. It basically says that it stands above all other laws, and any person or any law that the government or the Parliament makes that contradicts or is in conflict with the Constitution is to be invalid, is void, and of no force and effect in Grenada. So it starts there. Section 38 of the Constitution gives the Parliament the power to make laws for the good governance of the country. So it is Parliament is the lawmaking body, and as is the supreme constitutional institution, is the supreme institution of the state. It's a lawmaking body. Section 59 of the Constitution, 59.3, is a very important section, and that section says that at the end of the day, the cabinet must advise the Governor General, and the cabinet is answerable to the Parliament of the country. In other words, the Parliament can't be just doing what it wants to. It answers to the Parliament, as responsible to the Parliament for any advice it gives to the Governor General, or any decision, anything done under the authority of the exercise of that authority as ministers or as a cabinet, they're doing and must account to the Parliament. So those are important constitutional arrangements, and therefore we must always remember that the Parliament stands supreme. The standing orders set out you might say the rules that govern the proceedings of the Parliament. Yeah, in the case of the House, you have the standing orders of the House, you have the standing orders of the Senate. These are rules that govern how things must happen, and these rules make provisions for the establishment of working committees. Some of them are standing committees, meaning that they're permanent, they're there all the time. Others are sessional committees. They set them up when the Parliament meets for a new session, or for the purposes of taking on some particular assignment the Parliament may have. Yeah. In this case, the Standing Committee on Finance is a standing committee, as the name suggests, a standing committee of the Parliament, and it contains essentially all of the members of the House of Representatives. So all 15 persons are members of the Standing Committee of the House. And what this particular the standing orders makes provisions for the role and function of the Standing Orders Committee, as it does for the other working committees of the Parliament. Section 68, I believe it is, 68 of the Standing Committee of the, yes,
The standing orders.
Standing Committee of the Standing Orders says what the committee is to do. There shall be a Standing Committee on Finance. Its members shall be all the members of the House, except the Speaker. If the Speaker is not elected as a member, the Minister of Finance shall be the chairman of that committee. The Standing Committee on Finance shall meet at such times and as frequently as may be determined by the chairman, not less than 48 hours notice of each meeting being given to the members. But in cases of urgency, the Minister of Finance may dispense with the necessity of notice. Yeah. So it sets out that no less than 48 hours must be given by way of notice, recognizing that sometimes in government, in the cut and thrust of things, you do not have the luxury of always having a lot of time. I should mention that the Public Finance Management Act, which is one of the laws, one of the acts that govern the management of the country's public finances, does make provisions, I believe it's section 15, that the minister must submit to the Standing Committee on Finance the estimates for the next fiscal year at least 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. But as Mr. Lal Singh has mentioned, as a practical matter, this does not happen 2 months before. Now, he says that he believes the reason for that is manipulation and so on. In my own experience, I really do not believe that is necessarily the case. I must say so respectfully. In practice, is the government going to have these, let us say you're going to read the budget in November. In practice, is the government going to have the budget ready 2 months before that in draft form and be able to meet and discuss ahead of time, 2 months ahead of time? In my experience, that would be a very difficult mountain to climb, because you go to the budget, let's say in December. It takes time to get all the pieces in place, all the warrants done after January, February. You have a budget to implement. Let's say you have a capital program to implement of $300 million in the course of a particular year. You're not going to have that money expended by, let's say, August or September. And a lot of the things remain very much in the air, because the management of government in many respects is a kind of moving target. So I want to, I acknowledge that there may be some of that going on, but I do not believe that the motivations are always bad, in the sense that people are trying to manipulate the situation. It is perhaps part of the challenges of managing small economies with a lot of challenges, a lot of limitations, resources, and both human and material, and there may be some of those kinds of issues. So, in my experience, the standing orders does recognize this as a possibility and says at least give 48 hours notice before you do that. Yeah. The standing orders also provide that the chairman and not less than 4 members of the standing committee on finance shall constitute a quorum. Now, all of these things contemplate that it may not be possible to do it for 2 months or 3 months or a month. It also contemplates it may not be possible for all members to attend in all the circumstances, because, at the end of the day, if notice is given, a week, 2 weeks is given to meet, then some people may have their own challenges. Having said that, though, the role of the finance committee is very important. It is really it is a parliamentary committee, remember that, and the parliament is supreme. And the role of this committee is to provide what is called legislative oversight over the policies that inform the decision making that are reflected in the draft documents that the Minister of Finance and through him, the cabinet, is bringing forward. They would have taken into account a number of policy considerations and say, well, look, we can't give X to that particular appropriate line item. We can't give Y to this. We have to reduce this. We have to increase that based on certain policy considerations that the cabinet and the government may have in the exercise of their own executive prerogative, you might say. Yeah. But at the same time, the constitutional arrangement and the laws of the country contemplate that the finance committee, all of the members of the House sitting together, must have an opportunity to do some oversight as to the policies that are informing the numbers that are brought to them for consideration. So it is easy to blame, but I'm sure that some of it is not the result of malice. It is really the result of the challenges that they face. I will stop there, but those are the
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for teeing that up. Mr. Joseph, I want to get to what Mr. Lal Singh articulated. Granted, before this current parliamentary setup, your party, of course, the parliament does not recognize party. We have to make that point. But the legislators in the previous parliament came from the bowels of your organization in sort of 15, it was 14-1 initially, it was 15 seats. But do you agree with the notion that Mr. Lal Singh expressed here, that in fact Parliament has been treated as a rubber stamp?
First of all, let me start out by saying that we have to understand 2 things here. One, the Finance Committee is a committee of the whole House. There is no NDC, NNP when you sit in Parliament.
Yeah, that's right.
Each of you represent your various constituencies, and you are there to serve the people. So it is all the 15 members that make up this standing committee. Secondly, the Finance Committee meeting is not open to the public. Sometimes the public think that everything is held in secret, but no, it is a committee that meets in session to look at the estimate of revenue and expenditure as one of the main functions. Now, the current issue have to do with notice. That is the crux of the matter, that a date was set for the meeting in agreement with both sides of the House, and then it was changed arbitrarily and could not facilitate the meeting of the opposition and in the new date. So that is the crux of the matter. And I don't think the laws, the way the rules are set up. Remember, as Mr. Buck explained, 5 members could form a quorum, for this committee at the whole house. 5 members could. But the benefit of having the opposition there, so that they can flesh out all the issues at the finance committee meeting. So when you come to the budget presentation, there are certain issues that would have been addressed by the opposition at the finance committee meeting. So you don't need to raise it again in the budget presentation. So it's a very good opportunity for the government to listen, to ensure that this committee meeting, the members of the opposition, as much as possible, are present to get their views there, because that will help you. If you have to make any adjustments, it is done before you present the budget. So, and that is and that is one of the reasons it's a committee of the whole house. And therefore, I was sort of disappointed that the government went along just with their side, discussed the budget. Well, their side are the same ministers in cabinet that would have had the opportunity to discuss it in cabinet, because just your side that is in cabinet. And then you're listening to your side alone at the finance committee meeting. So how does that benefit you? I think it would be a reasonable, a rational position to have the opposition be present to make the contribution. You could say simply, well, the government are the majority, so they don't have to listen. That's not quite correct, They have to listen and take action. I don't believe the government do not listen, because if the opposition, if you don't listen to what is said by the opposition in parliament and go ahead with your policies because you have a majority, the time will come when the people will decide and the people will listen to the opposition, and you may not be in government. So in our democracy, these committees are set up for a particular purpose to ensure the democratic process functions in a very efficient manner, and not just simple the party with the majority. Well, of course, the party with the majority forms the government, but it is not just because I have the majority, well, I can just go ahead and do anything I want. For proper functioning democracy requires that both sides contribute to the issues to be discussed for the benefit of the state of Grenada.
Yeah, but I want to talk about perhaps a limitation that I'm seeing in respect of the standing orders here. Because Mr. Burke, in your citing of the standing orders, you indicated that notice is given within a period of no more than 48 hours. That sets up no less than 48 hours. That sets up a bit of an arbitrary timeline where the finance ministry and those on the government side can arbitrarily decide when they want to have the finance committee meeting. So I want to throw this question out to you, Mr. Lansing and Mr. Burke and Mr. Joseph. Do you believe that that particular aspect of the standing order needs revisiting? That gives a much more robust timeline to give members an opportunity to better prepare for the presentation of the estimates on revenue and expenditure?
See, I have sat on the finance committee for many years as an MP. And I've always felt strongly that something is wrong. Now, both gentlemen, Oliver and Nazim, they are correct. They're quite correct in what they are saying, according to the standing orders, the Constitution. But I look beyond what they are saying. I look beyond what is happening. It is my firm belief that we need to improve what we're doing. If we are going to discuss the budget of the Finance Committee, all elected members, is discussion alone enough? I believe that one should learn from each other. And if we have meaningful discussion, it's all about Grenada and how Grenada can succeed. So the Englishman has put in place a constitution for us at the time in the 70s. Now we are in 2023. We need to look at what is in place and see how we can improve on it. I believe there's room for improvement. And I want to hold on to my position. The Finance Committee, because of its limitation in time, it has been a rubber stamp. You go there, I've been there. You discuss, you look at issues, you ask questions, you disagree, nothing happens. The government proceed because they don't have time. They have very little time to finish the budget and present it. Now, when these things happen, the discussion is meaningless. It is meaningless. I'm saying that government is a business just like any other business. You can prepare, you can say what you have spent, you can say what monies are there and will be spent until the end of the year. You can do it 2 months in advance. But somehow, government and the people in the Ministry of Finance doesn't want to take time to get it done properly. We can't do it. And I believe if government, and I'm talking about all the government, if government sometime would listen to the opposition, the country can be managed differently and bring more benefits to the people. So I believe that the standing orders as it is needs to be amended. We need to show respect for all members on the Finance Committee so that we can get meaningful discussion and take whatever changes we can put in place.
Absolutely. You're still striking, you're still holding your feet to the fire there. Mr. Burke,
Yes.
the actual standing orders.
Yeah. Well, let me just say,
Yes.
there are two important points I think we need to remind ourselves of. The first is that at the end of the day, and Oliver made the point, they are there not as a political party, and I think you pointed out as well, not as a political party, but as members of the House, right? And so if a notice goes out saying we want to have a meeting next week, it would be pure coincidence if all four or all five members of the opposition happen to find themselves in a situation where it is inconvenient for all of them. In other words, the decision not to appear as an opposition party may well reflect a principled stance, a position that has been taken, not in your individual position as an MP, but as a political party, you're making a statement. So we cannot on one side say, well, look, we are independent members, and on the other side say, well, don't treat the opposition like that. You see? Because if they are members, two may say, well, look, you're giving me short notice, I can't make it. And two may say, well, it's convenient for me, I'm going to attend. Yeah, I'm just saying we must keep in mind they are individual members of parliament. And at the end of the day, it would be pure coincidence if everybody find themselves in a position where they cannot attend. Yeah. The second thing that I think we must remind ourselves about is that as much as we would like to see a government listen to an opposition and take on board the proposals and recommendations of a government, of an opposition party, and as much as that may well be in the long-term interest of the country, admittedly, as Kenny is pointing out, the truth is, what winning an election does is put at the disposal of the winning party the apparatus of the state and the resources of the state to implement its own policies and programs, its own vision for the country. So it is not going to simply adopt what the opposition says. I mean, practically in the Westminster system, when the government wins the election, it is trying to implement its own policies, not to implement what the opposition says, or to do what the opposition recommends. I'm not saying it is right. I'm saying that is a practical and stark reality that we will have to remind ourselves of. I do admit, as Oliver is pointing out, that listening to the opposition can benefit you. It can help you to rethink your policies, refashion your policies. It can help you to actually reinforce your own policies by listening to the comments and observations that are made. But we must not forget at the end of the day, the party wins an election and uses now the resources and apparatus of the state to implement its own vision for the country. And that has to be respected as part of the democratic arrangement. Having said those two things, I want to just go back to the point you were raising about the amendment to
the standing orders,
which
Mr. Lal Singh also articulated. Yes,
I do believe that there is merit, there is value in lengthening that time. 2 hours, 2 days is short, because even sometimes, as a practical matter, you may get a bundle of documents today, and it may not be practical for one reason or another, whether in government or in opposition, to actually go through, digest those documents in a matter of 48 hours on your own. And there might be situations, and in fact there should be situations, in which, in order to get a better appreciation and make a more meaningful contribution at the Finance Committee meetings, you may want to confer with persons, consult with people, ask them questions, get clarification on issues before you actually firm up your own position. So making that a longer period of time, I think, would be realistic. I do not believe that 7 days would be too much for something like that. I think for motions in Parliament, generally the notice period is 7 days. I do believe that 7 days would not be excessive in that instance at all. So I would support an amendment to the standing order to give it a longer period of time.
Mr. Joseph, does the ayes have it here in respect of the proposal that Mr. Burke has just advanced here, making sure that perhaps we can look at reforming the timeline for reviewing what ought to occur in the Finance Committee meeting?
Anything to advance democracy.
Yes.
If making the amendment will work in the interest of the democratic process, where Grenada will benefit because members of Parliament will have time, I will support it. But as Mr. Bokos pointed out, you in government because you got a majority, and you came into government because you promised, and you came in that you will implement new policies, and you say that you will be different from the last government, and people listen to you and give you the opportunity. So when you get in, obviously you will want to implement your policies. But I hold on to the point that in implementing your own policies, you need to listen to the voices. That's why you have budget consultation taking place all over. If you just take the position, well, I have the majority, then there is no need for consultation. And in fact, some people think the consultation is just semantic, it's just making people believe that they have a voice in the budget, but really nothing changes. So you must give the impression that you genuinely want to listen to the various sectors, that you want to get the views of the opposition. Because if you're doing it as a show, then it will lose its meaning. So with any amendment we're making is to ensure that we get genuine buy-in and intake. So Mr. Lal Singh might say, well, these consultations and them are waste of time because the government will go ahead anyway and implement it. It should never, but that should never be the case. Should be that the government genuinely wants to get feedback from the agriculture sector, from all the sectors, and in Parliament, they genuinely wants to hear it because it could help them improve and the policy and decision making. So if any amendment is going to help improve that, I am all for the amendment.
But Mr. Joseph, in hindsight, you now talk about the importance of the consultative process. Now, Mr. Tobias Clement might have a different view, or he might say that perhaps hindsight is 2020, because I do remember during your administration, Mr. Tobias Clement complained about receiving the estimates late as well, to which the then Finance Minister Gregory Bowen said, well, what can we do about that? We're just following the standing orders. So aren't now that you're on the other side of the fence, would you then say that hindsight is 2020?
No, that had nothing to do with hindsight. 48 hours is the minimum time. So he got it within the 48 hours. And even the complaint, you're not going outside of the standing orders. And so that is why Mr. Lal Singh is recommending that you change it and supported by Mr. Buck, that we look for the 7 days. I think 7 days is appropriate. So even though he complained, I am certain that he got it within 48 hours. And that is in the standing orders.
Okay, very well. Now let us talk about understanding the difference between the Finance Committee, and this is for both Mr. Burke and Mr. Joseph, the difference between the Finance Committee and the Public Accounts Committee. Can you, gentlemen, perhaps clear up what has been conflated as being one and the same? Mr. Burke.
Well, there are two different committees and they have two different functions. We've spoken about the role of the Standing Committee on Finance. This is a standing committee, as we said. The Public Accounts Committee is often, you might say, a joint select committee. This is a body which is set up in every session of the Parliament. And the idea is to have a body that is charged with the responsibility specifically to overlook government's finances. As Kenny pointed out, government is like a business. It has revenues, it has expenditure, it has, it is investing money, it is doing all the same things that businesses do. And financial statements and accounts have to be produced and prepared according to law that, says what happened with the government's money and how it was spent and to what end. And those accounts have to be examined by the special committee that is set up. It has the opportunity to review the accounts after they have been prepared. Yes, after they have been prepared, it has the opportunity to review those accounts prepared by the Accountant General and so. And in the course of reviewing those accounts, if there are questions about expenditure that are doubtful or raises issues of suspicion, of misappropriation, of misallocation, of uncertainty, then that committee has the right to call members of the public service charged with the responsibility in the relative ministry or department and question them in relation to those statements. And the law requires that once they get that notice, they must come in and answer the questions. To avoid, you might say, a self-serving situation, the standing order, which is standing order number 69 of the standing order of the House of Representatives, contemplates that this body will be chaired by the leader of the opposition, so that you don't have a minister of government running things and playing around with numbers which the government itself may have mishandled or misappropriated or misallocated. So the idea is it must be chaired. It's a committee of the House. The committee is elected by the House at the first sitting of the session of the House, and it must be chaired by the leader of the opposition and contain no less than 3 members. So that is the role of that committee, which is somewhat different from the Standing Committee on Finance. It must look at the audited financial statements of the government, and it will pass them if it is satisfied, or it will call people in and question them on what is going on. In that case, again, there's a quorum for the membership of that committee, a quorum for meetings of that committee, 2/3 of the total membership.
Absolutely. Mr. Joseph, I'm sure that's your understanding of the functioning there of the committees, or of the differences between the two. Now, Mr. Joseph.
Yes, the Public Accounts Committee is completely different. They perform the role of auditors. You see, they look at the accounts after and express an opinion. And then it's chaired by the leader of the opposition. It's a joint committee. So it plays a completely different role from the Finance Committee that looks at the estimates of revenue and expenditure. Big difference.
Absolutely. Mr. Burke, yes, if you wanted to add something there.
Mention here, interestingly, that the committee, the standing orders also provide for 48 hours notice for meetings of the Public Accounts Committee.
That 48 hours, that 48 hours, I do not understand how you can run a government with such short notice. It does
No,
not
he
make
said at
sense to me.
least, at least.
I know at least, but it's still very open ended. Mr. Lansing, don't you agree? It's just extremely open ended. At least 48 hours. I mean, arbitrarily, as the government indicated during their press conference, that look, we are not breaking any laws here in respect of the standing orders. We are actually following what the dictates are of the standing orders. Mr. Lansing.
See, I think we are living in the past.
Yeah.
The Englishman set us somewhat free. He gave us a constitution and we're living with it. But the constitution is inadequate. Now, both gentlemen are correct. The Public Accounts Committee is completely different to the Finance Committee. But you know, the laughable thing is that nothing really come out most of the time in the Public Accounts Committee. You know, because the accounts are most times laid very late. So the people now, they probably have 1 or 2 years behind. And who is looking at the accounts during the period of the NNP? Is the leader of the opposition and his NNP team. Are they going to question themselves at that period? So if you have 2 years, 2021, 2022, the Public Accounts Committee at this time is chaired by the leader of the opposition, who was the government before. They are going to look at what they did. Obviously, nothing will come out of it. It's going forward now. They will look at what the present government is doing. So there is something missing here in terms of continuity looking at public accounts. There is something not quite right. Because the people in finance, who is preparing the accounts and getting it laid, they're always behind, as I know it. And so there is so many things that we need to change. But unless the leadership of the country, and I'm talking about government and opposition, look at Grenada future, and sometimes jointly you have to make a decision. Don't always think about winning an election. Sometimes jointly you have to look at the interests of Grenada and make necessary changes. And probably the one who proposed it might have the better at it when election time comes. The other matter that was raised by both members is that a party campaign to get in the government. You get in with a certain amount of ideas, decisions, but sometimes not all the decisions that help you to get in government might be adequate or correct. Sometimes you have to modify. I see government and business as the same. You may want to do something, but when you actually get there, you realize, look, I can do it, but I better modify in it, because if I do, this will certainly be better for the country and its people. So you don't always have to do exactly as I said when you were campaigning. You can make changes. A smart politician and a smart businessman, you listen to your opponent. You take what they plan to do or what they have done, you modify it, and you implement it. Now, as a businessman, these are things I do. I look at what my competitor is doing. I modify it, and I present it differently, and I get the effect I'm looking for. Business is no different to politics. You can take what the opponent is saying, you can look at it, you can modify it, you can present it differently, and people might very well buy into your proposal. So not every time you have to go with what you plan or what you get elected for. You can modify. And you can.
There are caveats there. Well, Mr. Lalsinger, I'm glad you said that, because perhaps that is some advice you can give the current administration in respect of some of the promises that they have made, and that they have difficulty in implementing, but would not want to come out publicly to say that. And some of their acolytes will attack you for actually scrutinizing their work. So there is that as well. But we're going to talk about those attacks later on the program.
I can give you one instance quickly if you want.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I support the government for paying the pension.
Yes.
But if I was the prime minister and government, I would pay the pension in tranches. I wouldn't pay all the money all of one go, because what happens is that all this money go and get sit in the bank. Pensioners don't spend much money. Pensioners would hold the money there. So this is just one instance, that yes, you do what you say you're going to do, and I believe it is a good thing, but you can modify it and do it slightly different. That is just one of the cases, There are other instances, where you can do it slightly different and get a better result.
Absolutely, there is a need for reform. I mean, we attempted constitution reform before, and we saw where that ended up. So let's see, perhaps there might be another go at this, and perhaps if we take out this thing of politics from it, perhaps it might be successful. But gentlemen, and Mr. Lalsing, I want to keep you here for a bit, because I want to discuss some other matters that are unrelated to the topic at hand, as well as Mr. Joseph, because I want to respect both Mr. Burke's and Mr. Joseph's time. But Mr. Joseph and Mr. Burke, in moving forward, how do we get to a place where as you indicated in the setup of the segment, that we are able to have the parliament of the country function as the supreme arm of government in respect of the functions of the three arms of government. What we witnessed here last week, the opposition complaining about the rescheduling of the finance committee meetings and other matters related to procedural matters in respect of the parliament. How do we get to a place where we, quite frankly, do away with a lot of the anachronistic laws that we have, that, quite frankly, I do not believe are suited for us as post-colonial societies? I do not think that the Westminster system of democracy is suited for us, quite frankly. So this will be the closing here on this conversation. Mr. Burke, I'll begin with you.
Well, the thing is, we are raising two separate issues that perhaps should be spoken to. The first one is,
yes,
how do we go about changing some of the existing practices inside of the parliament? I should mention here that one of the sessional committees that is provided for in the standing orders is itself a standing orders committee, and that body is supposed to be looking at the standing orders, reviewing the standing orders, and making suggestions and recommendations as to what changes may happen with the standing orders themselves. This is a body made up usually of members from both sides of the House, and if a very open and objective attitude is adopted within the committee, and it is led by the right kind of spirit, you may find that committee itself can be the impetus, the trigger for change in the standing orders themselves, and revisions and modifications of the standing orders. So even if we remain within, the point I'm making there is that even if we remain within the Westminster system, there is still an avenue through which the standing orders may be amended. Yeah. On the broader point that you're raising, the second one, which has to do with constitutional change and getting the parliament to be functioning and the Westminster system, that is perhaps a bigger and broader question outside of my own pay grade. I at this point, what I can say is the challenge for us is to see whether or not we can revamp the Westminster system and make it more functional. Yeah, it is one of those things which we recognize in it that there are necessary evils, but so far perhaps there are very few better systems or alternatives that are available to us. It's much like I like to think of exams. Exams is a good way to test people's ability. If they get good marks, we say that they did well on the exam. But perhaps it is not a truly effective way to test people's ability and talent and how well they know or understand a particular subject or range of subjects. Because if you are the kind of person who suffer from very high anxiety levels and get stressed out, and your adrenaline, you become overwhelmed by an adrenaline rush during exam periods and writing exams, you may not perform well, not because you don't understand the subject matter, but because the environment puts you in a different place psychologically and emotionally. So it is not an ideal system, but perhaps you might say is the best thing we have until better can be done. Yeah. So that is how I would respond to that point.
So let us let me bring in Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, your thoughts on how we reform where we are? Because it's clearly dysfunctional at this point.
No. First of all, I don't agree it's dysfunctional. There is no perfect system. There is no ideal system. So it's not dysfunctional. Secondly, we held two referendum in Grenada for constitutional change, things that we wanted to change because we said that they were given to us by the British, and we thought our people were going to come and support it, vote so they can change. And what happened? Both failed because politics enter the scene, and instead of all the political parties working together, they took a different position, and it failed. So that is what to move forward in the parliament. You need both sides to work together. As Mr. Box said, there is a standing orders committee that could look at the standing orders, and you don't need constitution change for that. They make a recommendation for changes to the standing orders and take it to parliament. And so, but you need both, you need buy-in from both sides. Once you go in with the attitude that I don't have to listen to the opposition, I have the majority, not no change. So we need to be genuine, all the members of parliament. The government side must be willing to accept the fact that they need to work with the opposition, and jointly they will come up with solutions that are in the best interest of the country, not the best interest of any political party, but what is in the best interest of the country. And it could happen from inside the parliament itself with the parliamentary committee, the standing orders committee of parliament.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Burke and Mr. Joseph, I would offer you an opportunity for some closing comments before we get back to Mr. Lal Singh here.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say that I'm happy that you gave me the opportunity to share on the program. I think that the topic is a very critical one for the country, and it is important that the parliamentarians look at it honestly and objectively to see how they might find ways to improve. I do believe that a better way can be found, but the spirit of openness is going to have to play a critical role, because at the end of the day, as I said at the outset, what really matters most is how can we improve things for Grenada as a whole. So thank you very much, and I hope that the parliamentarians can find a way to work for the long-term interests of our country. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Burke. It's always a pleasure having you on the program, sir. So I do know that you're also part of an oil and gas exploratory committee. The journalist in me would not allow you to come here and not talk about that. But I know what you're going to say. I anticipate that you might tell me, well, we have not, we're just starting the fact finding. But do you have any updates for us, sir, that perhaps you want to share?
I'm sure you've seen we have started some work. We've started to advertise for support from technical support. So the time will come when we will report to you and report to the nation, of course. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, you're most welcome. Mr. Joseph, over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Yeah, well, thank you once again for the invitation to share. I think it was an enlightening discussion. Mr. Lal Singh, I think that because me and Mr. Bok are former civil servants, we share the same similar views because we come from the civil service and he's from the private sector. But that again shows that when you have people from different background sharing and giving their perspective, it enriches the conversation. Because Mr. Lal Singh brought a different perspective to me and Mr. Bok and the matter, and that's always healthy and good, and that is what I want to see going forward, that the two sides in Parliament could work together for the common good of Grenada.
Absolutely. Mr. Joseph, and as I always say, you have always been cooperative. You've never turned down an invitation, even while you were in government, to appear on the Bub Report. I can't say the same for your leader. I will keep saying this to you whenever you come on the program. And quite frankly, I can't say the same for some of the current government ministers in the NDC administration. So thank you again, Mr. Joseph, for appearing on the Bub Report, as well as Mr. Burke. Viewers and listeners, what we will do now is we will take a quick break, and Mr. Lal Singh, don't go anywhere. We're going to come back with you, sir, to have a conversation on some contemporary political issues that are animating national discourse in Grenada and, of course, in St. Lucia as well. So please stand by, folks.
Hello, everyone. I am Chantal McGuire, your local bred Grenadian actuary and asset liability management expert. Are you satisfied with your current finances? Are you curious and constantly looking for ways to make additional income? Join me on the Bub Report as we strive to empower you, our valued audience, to become more financially literate and help evolve Grenadians into a mindset that's investment focused and entrepreneurial. Literacy is about freedom. It's about being able to control your money and not letting your money control you. It's about foresight for a brighter future. Our core mission is to promote financial literacy and share money-generating opportunities for everyone. Join us on the last Sunday of every month, starting July 30th, as we strive to provide the keys to financial freedom.
To run in an election.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back to the program. And before I get back to Mr. Lal Singh, I now present to you this week's editorial. Now, last week, a third-party social media recording went viral in which Grenadian opposition leader Dr. Keith Mitchell was heard leveling homophobic slurs at someone who might be a powerful decision maker in the current administration that allegedly has the ability to hire and fire public servants. While he did not identify the individual or individuals in question, context clues attempted to provide answers, which is still speculation. The issue here is, however, not about trying to determine the source of the attack as much as it is about the nature of the slur. A flurry of outrage ensued from some supporters of the current administration, which is surprising because they seem to be only offended by homophobia when the attacks are leveled against people in their own tribe. At other times, they view members of the LGBTQ community as part of some nefarious agenda, attempting to dismantle the moral fabric of Grenadian society as we know it. Just look at the recent moral panic involving minuscule topics on LGBTQ identity from one module in an entire guidebook. Dr. Mitchell's hypocrisy here, however, is also glaring. 2 months ago, Dr. Mitchell went to bat for the late John T. Josiah Robinson, calling for external investigators to assist the Royal Grenada Police Force in solving the case. So, Dr. Mitchell, which is it? Were you genuinely interested in advocating on behalf of John T? Or did you see him as a political prop in one of your political scripts? But enough about the hypocrisy. Maya Angelou said, quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," unquote. No one should therefore be surprised by Dr. Mitchell's utterances, as he has uttered homophobic slurs in the past. Do we remember the Tevin Andrews calling Tevin Andrews Teresa Andrews, or calling Mr. Arlene Dowden? But Dr. Mitchell's homophobia, however, is a reflection of the nature of Caribbean societies, and other politicians have also expressed open homophobia in the past in the Caribbean. In 2008, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Bruce Golding, said, quote, "Homosexuals will find no solace in my cabinet, in any cabinet formed by me," unquote, in a BBC interview. Following Bruce Golding's comments in Jamaica in 2015, Finance Minister Colin Imbert of Trinidad and Tobago said on Twitter, quote, "Please don't use the words bull and paradath and me in the same sentence. Afraid," unquote. Imbert here was referring to MP Barry Patherath of the United National Congress. In 2007, former Barbadian Environment Minister Dennis Lowe attacked Mia Mottley by saying, quote, "The Barbados Labour Party is led by a self-declared Whigger," unquote. Whigger, by the way, is a term for lesbian in Barbados. Now, while the party later distanced themselves from his statement, he himself refused to apologize. While attitudes with respect to understanding and respecting LGBTQ people are slowly changing, deeply held religious beliefs still enable a culture of homophobia in a vast majority of the Caribbean region. In many countries in the region, politicians and faith leaders refer to calls to overcome entrenched inequality and violence against LGBTQI people as, quote, the gay agenda, unquote. This phrase is construed to mean a global gay conspiracy with a strategy to overtake the world. Even more dominant in the media is the notion that LGBTQI people are destroying the nation, and in particular, the family. They are seen as purveyors of moral decay. These conspiracy theories are reflected and reinforced uncritically by journalists quoting homophobic officials or by editors who write value-based headlines that refer to the so-called gay agenda. So while we should not hold our breaths waiting on an apology from Dr. Mitchell over his comments, Mitchell's view is a reflection of the society because he is a product of the society. And finally this week, Grenada's ratings-obsessed connoisseur of poisonous bile and the current administration's cheerleader of hate and intolerance in the social media space, in the name of their fiercely guarded transformation agenda, decided to attack me for exercising the editorial authority I have to invite whatever guests I can to this platform. The guest in question this week is Mr. Alan Chastanet, the current opposition leader of St. Lucia, who also served his country as a former prime minister of St. Lucia. It's interesting his choice of platform to attack, because a platform which is very friendly to the current administration also weighed in on the St. Lucia issue, but he has not attacked the host of that platform. This has been this demagogue's fourth such attack in 6 years against someone he clearly hates with contempt, making one wonder why his obsession with me and the platform he said is starved for ratings and views in the first place. The only other narcissist who speaks of ratings with such constant frequency is Donald Trump. So there might be some similarity there between the two. Fortunately, as I said privately on my other social media page, I do not depend on the eat-a-food economy to survive. So social media views do not define who I am and what I do. My identity, my professional identity, is a diverse array of intersecting talents undergirded by years of hard work. Fortunately for me, I also do not have to wake up every day and think about which opponent I will bully today so as to not lose out on the diaspora meal ticket or whatever other benefits you are receiving due to your proximity to power. The impact of the eat-a-food economy on people such as yourself is that you are perpetually imprisoned by a narrowly defined political agenda that sets the terms about what you can and cannot say. What you will not do, sir, is to set the terms of what we do here on the Bub Report. In the unlikely event that we're hiring anyone to produce this program, we would let you know. But we will require people with emotional intelligence as a bare minimum qualification. Political sycophants and zygotes in developing states like Grenada are limited by their dependence on financing from political parties and the deep pocket financiers who dictate the terms of their hateful rhetoric. The beauty of being independent is that I do not have to sing for my supper on the daily on a social media platform. His relentless appetite for controversy and attacking people that he disagrees with has coarsened the body politic of Grenada, where any disagreement with the current administration and with the previous administration as well is viewed as a thought crime that must be crushed by attempting to destroy the credibility of anyone who expresses a different view to the prevailing transformational orthodoxy. Political intimidation often involves tactics aimed at discrediting individuals and undermining their reputation, which he has leveled against his opponents, including myself. Well, except for one young woman from St. Patrick's, who he has been surprisingly silent about. Narcissistic bullies with a megaphone as massive as that of the NDC's toxic mouthpiece are driven by an inflated sense of self-importance. They often leave a trail of anger and division in the society. Like religious and political cultists, those who support this narcissist also make enemies with friends and members of their own families and own tribes in the name of partisan politics. Notwithstanding the continued hate we receive from some current supporters of the current administration and their angry mob, we will not be intimidated into silence here on the Bub Report. The Bub Report will press on and provide balanced, informed, contextual, lifted, and intelligent journalism. The merchant of anger and intolerance has a right to express his deeply held opinion because this is a marketplace of ideas. This is what the democratic process allows. However, any form of bullying will not be tolerated on this platform by anyone who dares to question the humanity of myself, the founding producer, or anyone else associated with producing this weekly program. This does not mean wallowing in the mud with swine, because the swine likes the adrenaline rush that comes when others join them in the mud. Resisting silence, therefore, becomes a powerful act of courage and resilience in the face of intimidation. Embracing one's voice and encouraging the expression of diverse perspectives are not only fundamental rights, but are also essential elements for the proper functioning of a democracy. Therefore, the Bub Report shall not be moved, and we will press on to continue to do what we are doing. And Mr. Lal Singh, I'm sorry I kept you here for as long as I did, but we do want to just offer you an opportunity to provide some contemporary comments in respect of what has been happening on the ground in Grenada recently. Of course, the Prime Minister of Grenada was in St. Lucia recently, and he made some comments in respect of what might be happening on the ground there. And those comments, while he did not mention the name of the Honorable Alan Chastanet, who incidentally just joined us. Mr. Chastanet, welcome to the program. We'll be getting to you shortly, sir. But it was implied, and we're going to talk about the context of that with Mr. Chastanet when he comes on. But Mr. Lal Singh, talk about your reaction to this. Has there ever been a time in your experience where politicians essentially just got overboard and insert themselves into the internal affairs of other countries when they're invited as guest speakers to speak at conventions and other events?
I think it has happened before, but I can't really tell you exactly when it did.
Yes.
But I think I've heard it before, that persons interfering into the internal affairs. Now, if that is so, I don't think it's correct. I think we should avoid you interfering with the internal affairs. I believe some time ago a Jamaican came to the New National Party convention and must have interfered, but I can't remember the exact words that were said. But I would urge all of us in the Caribbean, when we go, we should not interfere with the internal affairs of any country. You go there to bring greetings, to help the party develop itself, help the membership to grow, whatever you can do to help them. But I would advise that now and in the future, we stay away completely from interfering in internal affairs.
Of course, those who support the current prime minister, they're saying, well, so what? He said somebody should not, who was born in another country should not be in politics. And so that, they're saying, so what? So it's so, Mr. Lal Singh, to you, the so what?
Well, party loyalists, even if you're a butcher, a dictator, they are loyal to the party and its leader. And you will go blindly all the way. But one have to always remember, while the party loyalists work with the party to develop it, but who wins the election are the drifting voters. These people move from party to party, and they are the ones that make the difference at election time, not really the party supporters. Because usually in most countries, the dynamic hardline party supporters are the same. And so they had to be careful, that we keep things above board. We are all Caribbean people and we need to work together and try not to offend as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were advising the prime minister, of course, you would tell him that perhaps this is not behavior that should be appropriate or encouraged if he does, appear on other political platforms in other countries.
No, I will tell anybody that, that is, I've been a politician for a long time. And I don't believe we should. There's a limit to everything we do, even in business, you don't go out there and blast your colleague business person. You might look at the weakness and see how you can build on it, but you don't go out there and talk about the weakness. And similarly in politics, I don't believe you should. I don't know if it was said in that context, but if it was, we should avoid it now and in the future.
Yeah. So yes. So you are correct. And so, Mr. Lal Singh, thank you so much. You're looking forward to the budget, I'm sure. What are your expectations in respect of what the government should be advancing and proposing for this upcoming budget?
Well, I'm looking forward to the budget because I need Grenada to succeed. That has always been my position. My country must succeed, regardless of which government is there. I want to see the economy grow. This year's budget, nothing has really happened from all that was spoken about. So I hope when they come and present the budget for 2024, they would actually say how far they have gone in terms of the 2023 budget. Because I have not seen a lot being done, although a lot was promised. I would really like to see the national health insurance. This is something I want to see. Government and the people together cannot provide the best health care for our people. And so a proper national health insurance, whether it's part of the national insurance scheme or it's a new entity, there is a need to set up a national health insurance. Bob, at my company, Calico, I pay an insurance for every member of my staff. After they have been employed for 3 months and we keeping them on, I pay 100% insurance for every member of staff. That's to tell you how I care about it. Because almost every day, somebody in Grenada is begging, making an event to raise money so that they can go outside of Grenada to get health care. And so I want to see this happen. I know the government talk about a new hospital that's going to have to take a long time. I would say to them, try and develop primary health care. Primary health care is very important so that people can get the health care in every parish. And they don't always have to run to the hospital. More importantly, we need to equip our healthcare with equipment. We need to have good maintenance. And additionally, we need to well man our healthcare system. Adequate nurses, adequate ambulance, adequate doctors. We need to do it. But I believe all these things will happen if and when the government, the former government NNP, spend maybe $15 million trying to set up a national health insurance, and it never happened. I hope this government will be able to set it up without any losses, because I believe it is important. And the other thing I would really want to see is the government, and I've told the previous one, we need to start building roads. Yes, we're patching roads, and making it reasonable. And I'll talk about roads here. I must say, this government is doing a better job in maintenance of the roads in Grenada. They are doing a better job than the previous government in terms of road maintenance. But I want to see them, I've spoken about it before, while we maintaining our roads, we should look at new structure. More vehicles are coming into Grenada. We need to build some good 2- and 4-lane proper roads so that the country can benefit. We can see progress. We can accommodate the vehicles. We can accommodate our tourism industry and the people who are coming. These are the two main things I would want. Of course, there are a lot of other things like, tourism need to grow, I remember just after COVID, I posted something on Facebook and said to the government at the time, now COVID is over, please get the airport expansion going. And many people criticize me. I believe we need.
Why did they critique you? Because I mean, we do see a spanking new air bridge that they're at the Maurice Bishop International Airport.
You see, a lot of things is politics. I said to Dr. Mitchell and his government, select the right contractor, make the right decision, get the airport going, because I predict tourism will grow. The cruise and traveling public will double as we go forward. So I want Grenada not to be left behind. As a matter of fact, when the thing was being designed, I was part of it. And my position was we should have 4 jet bridges. And they thought it was too expensive. So they ended up with 2. But I believe that we need to do it. And if tourism grows, most importantly, every farmer in Grenada will make a lot of money because they have the land, they know what to do, and they will grow the fruits and vegetables to feed the population and to feed the tourism industry.
Absolutely. Mr. Lal Singh, thank you again for appearing on the Bob Report. And what I admire about people like yourself, sir, is that even though you declare your loyalty or declare your support, let me not say loyalty, your support for a particular political party, you are independent enough to offer critique in such a way as to provide guidance and support. And I think that's what it should be about in respect of the grand scheme of things for national development.
Well, this is what I always do. Of course,
yes.
It has affected me by being open and speaking. It has happened way back in the revolution because I disliked certain things. They locked me out for 2 years. Got elected, they kicked me out because I am too frank in what I'm saying,
Yeah.
So it has affected me back, but I will not stop. That's one thing I promise you. I will say what I have to say.
Yep.
Always.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whatever I say, like you just said, is to offer advice in terms of what we are doing and how we can succeed.
Absolutely. Mr. Lal Singh, thank you so much for appearing on the Bob Report, sir. Viewers and listeners, we will take a quick break and we will come back because we are now joined by Mr. Alan Chastanet, who is the current leader of the opposition in our neighboring St. Lucia, and he's also the political leader of the United Workers' Party. Mr. Chastanet, we had to jump through some hoops to get you here, but we finally got you here, sir. Welcome to the Bob Report.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Please.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah. Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
That is only people who live in St. Lucia continue to run St. Lucia. So, I want to tell you a little story. I could have lived in Canada too, But I chose Grenada. My mother was living in Canada. In fact, I have a brother living there still. But I chose Grenada. So I want all St. Lucians to hear me. When the time comes, make sure that it's St. Lucians who you're putting into office. Make sure that it's people who like the Caribbean, who like Caribbean institutions, who are proud of our culture and of our heritage.
I'm a product of Canada. I did my high school in Canada. I did my university in Canada. Both my kids go to school in Canada.
So those were two clips that sets up the tease up the conversation that we're about to have with Mr. Alan Chastanet, who served as Prime Minister of St. Lucia, but who currently serves as the leader of the opposition in St. Lucia. And Mr. Chastanet, the circumstances that brought you here are very interesting, but we are certainly happy to have you here. Certainly, we want to have you back, sir, to talk about the future of tourism in the Caribbean in a post-COVID economy, given your background and expertise in the tourism sector. So, Mr. Chastanet, welcome to the Bub Report.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Chastanet, of course, as you know, as you're a politician, politicians get invited to speak as guest speakers in other political parties' conventions. I'm sure you were invited to speak at a political parties' convention in other countries. Let us talk about, before getting into the meat of the matter of this conversation, let us talk about principles of non-interference that you've adhered to. Like, let's say your colleague, Dr. Mitchell in Grenada invited you to speak at the NNP convention, or your colleague in Jamaica invited you to speak at the JLP convention. What do you have at the back of your mind when you're thinking about what to say at a political convention? Because what tends to happen, sir, is that there is the impression that a guest speaker's presence at a political party's convention is an implicit endorsement of that particular political party. So can you understand why people might perceive that in general as being a problem, especially for sitting prime ministers in the region?
So I'm glad you made that distinction.
Yes.
So in the region, we have political brothers and sisters aligned by ideology. So there are really two such movements in the Caribbean. One is called the Caribbean Democratic Union, which tends to be the conservatives. Now, the word conservative in the Caribbean is not the samely defined or the same meaning as other conservative parties around the world, although we're aligned to those entities through what's called the International Democratic Union. And then you have the socialist movement. So you will find that party supporters, whether they be political leaders, members of the party, going to each other's conventions. So the distinction that you've made, which is a very important distinction, which changes things, is when you're a sitting prime minister and you go over to your sister party's convention, then that requires a lot more constraint. For instance, I just recently, as the leader of the opposition of St. Lucia, attended the leader of the opposition's convention in Belize. And similarly, he, if you remember, attended my meeting. And really the purpose of those things are to speak about each other's ideologies, policies, and to offer advice to the base of the party. So particularly if we had just recently lost, what are the lessons that we've learned and how they can apply them in building their own party and hopefully getting into government themselves.
Absolutely. So it's important. I think the nuance here must be established that, but most of you are normally invited to speak in your capacity as political leader and not as prime minister. Yes.
Correct. But there's no way of separating the two when you are the prime minister.
This is the point. This is the point that needs to be made. Now, Mr. Chastanet, given our Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell's comments and utterances, and the comments and utterances of other people within the St. Lucia Labour Party at their conference, in respect of your allegiances to St. Lucia, I did play that clip here. So where you were talking about, of course, because I was trying to find the full clip to provide better context, but unfortunately the news site did not provide the full clip. But can you contextualize that conversation you were having, in which you said you're a product of Canada and you spoke about your children being in Canada and so on and so forth?
Sure. This was during the COVID period, and we were trying to advocate within Canada to put pressure on the Canadian Prime Minister to assist us in getting vaccines. It was, honestly, a horror show to be prime minister during that time, in which we felt like the world had turned their back on us. We could not get ventilators. We couldn't get PPP items. And I became very good friends, in fact, with Governor Cuomo during that period, because even the state of New York was being outbidded on many occasions in trying to get equipment. So we had written to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister in Canada. We had written to Justin Trudeau in Canada. Sorry, Boris Johnson in the UK, Trudeau in Canada. We'd written to President Trump. We'd written to world leaders. In fact, the only world leader that came to the assistance of the Caribbean was Modi in India. So I was on a radio show, a TV show in Canada, and trying to use the fact that I had gone to high school and had gone to university in Canada. And it just so happened at the time that both my kids, my son is attending the same high school that I attended, and my daughter was just graduating from high school in Canada. So the issue that is being brought up, maybe if I can just preempt you a little bit, has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I went to school in Canada. So that was the first mistake that your prime minister made in his faux pas. The issue at hand has more to do with the fact that I was born in Martinique as to whether I qualify to be a prime minister of St. Lucia.
Well, except I would push back there. The Prime Minister of Grenada never said whether or not your birthright was in question. He said whether or not people who live in St. Lucia.
So again, and
Yes.
again, it shows his naivety, his lack of being informed, and maybe because of his own arrogance, that he found himself making that statement. Because even that would be a wrong statement. How could a person who has spent the last 18 years in elected politics in St. Lucia not live in St. Lucia? How? So the only thing that I have done abroad, which I think that there are many people who've gone abroad for education. You know, most of us used to go to England until England stopped giving us access to fees that were equivalent of being a Commonwealth member. And a lot of persons end up going to Canada, and so did I. I mean, I went to school in St. Lucia. My whole life has been in St. Lucia. My family's life has been in St. Lucia. My wife's, both my family and my wife's family have been here for 4 generations. So where would that comment come in? Who doesn't live in St. Lucia? So here it is, everybody knew who he was speaking of, yet the way that he was describing that person made absolutely no sense. Only made sense to the party hacks who thought that it was supporting their argument that because I was not born in St. Lucia, that I should not be contesting the elections.
So thanks for setting that up, because in Grenada, there is the impression that the Prime Minister just made those random comments about birthright or living in a particular country, that those comments were made out of context and there is a so what question. So what? He just made a comment in general. But we are providing the context to that conversation. Now, Mr. Chastanet, let us talk about just the, I would say the very migrant nature of our Caribbean civilization, such that people are born. Sir John Compton, for example, was born in the island of Canouan in the Grenadine Islands. He led St. Lucia to independence. Grenada's own Maurice Bishop was born in Aruba to Grenadian parents, of course. He led the Grenada Revolution during that time. Let us talk about your own story, sir, in respect of your birthright. I'm sorry, not your birthright, but your origin birth story.
So there's 2 aspects to the story. Is that
yes.
One, my father was born in St. Lucia. As I said to you, he's 3rd generation. My father was born out of his grandmother was a black woman, and she was working for a white gentleman, and she had children out of wedlock, 3 kids, my grandfather being one of them. And then when you look into the roots of our family, we've been interracial for 2-3 generations. My mother came from Ireland. And the irony here is my mother left Ireland when she was 17, feeling that Ireland didn't offer her any future. And she went to England to do nursing and found out that she was relegated to a group of people in the UK called Blacks, Irish, and Dogs. That's who were categorized together. If you remember in the Irish history, Irish persons were oppressed by the English for over 600 years.
They were colonized. That's why I'm kindred spirits with the Irish, but go ahead.
Right, but and it took them 600 years.
Yeah.
Right, and my mom, because of that class system, actually lived with two black women, and both of them happened to be from St. Lucia. And so when she graduated, instead of going to Canada immediately, they invited her to come to St. Lucia. And in coming to St. Lucia, on her 2nd day, she looked across the street and saw my father, fell in love, and said she was going to marry him, who was a black man. And after dating him and getting pregnant, went back to England and did not want to let my father know the story. And she had a child, which my sister Abigail. And Abigail was adopted. Now, it was then discovered when she did get married with my father that my parents had rhesus negative, meaning had opposite blood types. Today, the solution to that problem is they would simply take a pill and it would not cause a problem. But in those days, there was not that situation. And as a result of it, each child that you have, it gets progressively worse. So for that reason, I was born in Martinique so that I could receive a blood transfusion. And during when I was born, I didn't need it, flew back to St. Lucia, then realized I did need it, and they sent me back to Martinique. My brother was also, who came a year and a half after me, was born in Martinique. And sadly, he died after his 5th or 6th day because of this situation. And my sister, who then is 3 years after me, they took her to Boston, and she was actually the first child to survive 7 transfusions. In fact, she almost died several times. So it was for that purpose and that reason why I was born in Martinique, but I grew up my entire life as St. Lucia. I've never took up my citizenship in France. I never did any military service in France. So I've never gotten a European passport for being born in Martinique. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, you are essentially a quintessential Caribbean man, as we say. The Caribbean is indeed a melting pot, and I think we have to appreciate that. Yes.
Yes, sir.
But let us talk about and 2 final questions, sir. 2 final issues we're going to talk about here. Let us talk about the context of this conversation in St. Lucia. Why is that happening now, and why is that animating those political conversations now by the ruling administration?
So we always expect in politics that when you have 2 opposing political parties, there are always going to be personal attacks or attacks on each side. I mean, that's just become sadly the norm in our politics. What we've seen here in St. Lucia is an extreme. So after the government won the election, in which they won 15-2, which is a pretty hefty majority in the House.
Yeah.
The government has continued to attempt to suppress me and to attempt to attack me. So they went to the extent where they tried to take me to the Privileges Committee for statements that I made in the House. I eventually had to go to court to seek protection, which I won. They then came back and tried to expel me from the House indefinitely. Again, I had to go to the courts to obtain relief, which I did. And there's just been a relentless attack on Alan Chastanet, and one particular person who is Richard Frederick. So Richard, on his show, said that he personally believed that no one who was not born in St. Lucia should be entitled to be the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Mm-hmm. And we saw that the Prime Minister's own Facebook page changed to highlight the fact that he was born in Castries, St. Lucia. And then the next thing was, a week or so later, the Prime Minister came down to St. Lucia and made these comments. So all of a sudden, there was this buildup towards this policy change. The people in St. Lucia started reacting very negatively to this very quickly, because there are a lot of St. Lucians, for the same reason I've had, and for multiple of other reasons, have had their children outside of St. Lucia. When you were working for the state, so for instance, Boris Johnson was born in the United States while his parents were studying there. There are persons who were traveling abroad to get a job, and their kids are born outside there. And the diaspora has remained a very important part of our economic growth. We depend on them significantly for remittances, and they want to feel like they're still part of home. So this really touched a nerve in many St. Lucians. And I think that this would be an issue that St. Lucians are, I don't mean literally, but are willing to fight for and defend this particular clause that we have in our Constitution.
Talk about that clause in your Constitution that enables diasporans to be fully embraced as St. Lucians.
Our clause says that in order to run for office, you must be a citizen of St. Lucia, and you must have resided in St. Lucia for at least 12 months. You know, that criteria might be a little bit too low, and I think that may need some amendment, particularly now that we've introduced CIP. But that is the criteria. It doesn't speak about being born in St. Lucia. And remember, we also have the situation like Grenada, where we became independent when many of us had been born abroad or had a British passport. And so what happened was, it says, the Constitution says, and in our case, 1979, that anybody who was a St. Lucian citizen would now be considered to be St. Lucian, even though that they had the British passport prior to that. So you have to be a St. Lucian citizen. Doesn't mean you have to be born in St. Lucia. And you have to reside in St. Lucia for at least 12 months to qualify to be an MP.
Do you think that the current administration, are you suggesting that they might be telegraphing moves to change that particular clause in the Constitution, such that would enable only St. Lucian borns to run as for public office in the country?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what do you think the impact would be of that?
Absolutely, they would. And given that they have a 2/3 majority in the House, they could easily accomplish that if they wanted to. That's what I'm saying to you, is I think that this would be a red line for many St. Lucians. And I don't think that St. Lucians would put up with it. Now, certainly if the government wanted to make sure that they were in step with the people of St. Lucia, that they would allow a referendum. But here it is on something as important as the CCJ. The government here used the technicality and denied people the right to have a referendum to determine whether they wanted to go to the CCJ as their final court of hearing. I mean, in fact, the government went as far as kicking me out of the House the day that the debate was to take place. So the opposition did not even have a voice the day that was being passed in Parliament.
Mr. Chastanet, of course, we are 2 years out until a constitutional election is due in your native St. Lucia. Let's assume that perhaps you win the next election. That's certainly going to make for an awkward encounter between yourself and the Prime Minister of Grenada, against the backdrop of those comments that were made.
Well, again, you know, one of the things I have said repeatedly is that, you know, the OACS on paper has actually a great formula for regional integration, much better than CARICOM. You know, CARICOM is flawed in many ways, but the OACS is much better. But that level of commitment of integration requires a code of ethics. And sadly, that's not been accompanied in our integration. The opposition in the OACS is tended to be treated as pariahs and is to be treated as enemies of state. So even a sitting prime minister coming to your country and meeting with the leader of the opposition is frowned upon. The sitting government would feel disrespected if that happens. Although ambassadors from other countries of the world come to our islands and meet with both the leader of the opposition and the prime minister. And we forget sometimes that the leader of the opposition is actually an established position within government. And it should not be treated that way. And this would be certainly if sitting prime ministers and even leaders of the opposition in other countries, when they're visiting other countries, it is understood and treated as officials coming to your country and are given the opportunity to meet with both political leaders, would give that person the context of what's taking place in your country. So clearly, your prime minister, and that's where the naivety comes in, that would have arrived in St. Lucia and not taken the time to have understood both sides of the argument and to know which things not to get involved in. I've never met him. Okay, so I think that there's a maturing that needs to take place in our region if this experiment of OACS is to work. You cannot isolate and demonize leaders of the opposition. and to take advantage of you being in government to do so. If we're going to be in a democratic country, society, and that those are the ideals that we prescribe, then we need to adhere to them. And I would say to this nonsense of treating leaders of the opposition as enemies of the state and finding ourselves being involved, and let's say it explicitly, being involved in the politics of your country, and the politics of your country, of any country, are very diverse. We have oppositions. We have people who have different sets of opinions. And therefore, to come to a country and to say that you as an outside prime minister is giving preference to one over the other is grossly inappropriate and unacceptable.
Absolutely, and that integration point you make is a very significant, a very important point. Sometimes, we talk about integration, but in reality, even some of our own leaders don't practice that, the spirit of integration in the context of what the OECS articulates. Now, Mr. Chastanet, has your party, the United Workers' Party, learned the lessons that contributed to its defeat in the last election? And what will those lessons, how will those lessons inform your strategy for the next election whenever the ruling St. Lucia Labour Party decides to ring the bell?
Well, it would be almost impossible for me to ever say to you that I can give you an objective answer to that question because persons always find it difficult to accept their own flaws. But the reality is we lost the election. And there were many things, I think, that contributed, and maybe not anything in itself that caused the problem. COVID was a big problem. And I think even though my government will go down in the times of history as one of the best governments in the world in handling COVID, that did not manifest, that success did not manifest itself in the polls. We had a long-standing member, Stevenson King, that went away from us 2 days after the election was announced. So here was a gentleman that I was on TV with the night before I made the announcement. He would not have known I was going to make the announcement the following day, speaking the praises of the party, and then 2 days later, leave and go as an independent. And there was no way for us to recover. I mean, this is a gentleman who'd been in his seat for over 30 years to recover in that particular instance. The party suffered because there were clearly changes that we should have made. The signs were all there to make them, but we did not have the internal fortitude to do so. And there is reasons for that. I would say to communication. Too many times that statements were being made that were, in my mind, easily defeated or contradicted, and we did not do a good enough job in doing that. The rise of social media. Persons take social media as face value. When we had traditional news institutions, BBC, NBC, ABC, there was an expectation, there was a certain amount of due diligence that went into making statements. We have a lot of social media outlets where that is not taking place, but people take the issues as face value. I mean, I even watch the commentary that's taking place on Ukraine and Russia, and some of these stories that come across, and they speak so factually, they convince a lot of people. We see it with medicine, right? With these, solutions. So
I mean, we saw it during COVID.
We saw it a lot during COVID. And sadly for us in St. Lucia, this movement towards racism. So Alan Chastanet was made out to be the face of slavery, made out to be the face of plantocracy and colonialism. When one knows my history, that's virtually impossible. But it was only being attached to me because of the color of my skin, and that became successful because you cannot win an election without a strong leader. That's the reality in our region, and I applaud the Labour Party. They did a fantastic job of diminishing my shine, if I can call it that, or using my shine against me. So we learned a lot of lessons, and the big lesson is that we have to stop relying on one person as being the face of the party, Your candidates have to be much better educated on the different policies, even though you are a minister of one particular ministry, you are in a cabinet in which you have a responsibility for overseeing the entire government. So you have to be familiar with all the government's policies, and you have to continuously repeat it. So I think that what's happened here in St. Lucia in the last 2.5 years is a lot of persons have recognized they've been duped. So the allegations of corruption have not manifested themselves. The projects that we were working on, the airport, the new golf course, the new horse racing track, the development of cast trees, the road redevelopment. I mean, the government said that you can't eat roads when they were in opposition. And today, they have not been maintaining the roads. So we have a joke here where we say, well, the roads are eating us. So a lot of those things now, people are starting to see that these were just statements that were made for political reasons and they had no substance to them. Our turn will come again. And as I keep saying to people in politics is not a destination. It's a journey. And I thought that Prime Minister Gonzalez put it really well. He said, as people, we are aspirational. So when you are poor, you aspire to be in the middle class. When you're in the middle class, you aspire to be wealthy. And when you're wealthy, you aspire to be even wealthier. We are insatiable when it comes to our desire to continue to get better. And therefore, it will always be impossible for the same political group to achieve all of those things.
Absolutely. How are you going to deal with, and this is the penultimate question before I give you an opportunity to wrap up, sir. You mentioned the departure of Stephenson King from your political party, but also Richard Frederick, who contested as an independent, was also expelled from the UWP. What does it say about your leadership that these two very prominent men, well, of course, Frederick was expelled, but, Mr. King voluntarily left. Is there something for your own self-reflection that perhaps you've reflected on about your own leadership style that might have contributed to that?
Well, I think that we stand by why we kicked out Richard Frederick.
Okay.
Richard Frederick was very disrespectful publicly to the party. And his behavior started from long ago. And therefore, you cannot have that within your party. If we can have differences within the party, but they must be kept internal. And so when you go out to do things to undermine the reputation of the political party, that was probably started because Richard lost his U.S. visa and his diplomatic visa and was associated to extrajudicial killings by the police in St. Lucia, something that he was never able to separate himself from. And therefore, that contributed to it, but was not the reason why he was expelled from the party. In the case of Stephenson King, after he lost the election in 2011, refused to hold Richard Frederick accountable, and also found himself fraternizing with the Labour Party, even against his own party. And so he was removed as the political leader, and he was removed as the leader of the opposition in the House. I think the failing of our party was to think that he could ever overcome that kind of admonishment by the party. But we all thought that he was a bigger person. He'd given us the undertaking that he had gotten past that. But clearly, what he did showed us that he never got past that. And maybe it was naive on our part to believe that he could. I think it's what all this speaks to is that a political party has to have an ideology, and you have to have a code of ethics, you have to have morality, you have to have integrity, and you have to have a singular focus and purpose. But that's what the ideology is. You have to have a conviction. And so it's impossible to have a party in which people don't share those things. So I remember we changed our values in our party. And one of the most important values that we changed was the word loyalty. And a lot of people will tell you that political parties cannot survive without loyalty. I mean, I heard you speaking previously about the hacks on either side. That's what loyalty is, right? We changed that word to being mutual respect. All right, there has to be mutual respect if this thing is going to work. So you're allowed to have your opinion. You need to express it in a very respectful way, but also understand that there's also different perspectives, and you have to learn how to communicate those differences in a very respectful way. So when I'm taking on a position, I'm taking on a position because I'm looking at it from a particular perspective, and you must respect that and understand that, and then argue the point in the detail of my argument, not just say, oh, you're this or you're that, and personalize all of these different things. So mutual respect is a very important part. I can say to you that that's something that Richard Frederick clearly does not practice. We don't share the same ideology as his. He is a person who does everything to get into power and will change his narrative. So that does not follow the lines of having an ideology. And there are many things that he does that I would not be able to support as a political leader.
Okay.
Even what he's doing
All
with
right.
the Labour Party right now is he's making a mess of our democracy. Can you imagine that this man went on a radio show and said that he was getting information from policemen and to build files on individuals and using that information to attack them? And he was not fired? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
That's how
That's overreach. I mean, that's clearly a breach.
And then going on the TV and personally attacking people. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to do that to you, as a sitting minister in government in the Prime Minister's office. Right. So I'm just saying to you that our party is very proud of our history, and that we are servants to our party. No one is above accountability in our political party.
And
we want the
yes,
best for
but let us take a pin. You said no one is above accountability, and would you put yourself in that bracket? Because I'm yet to hear you say what specific changes perhaps you would make in reflecting on your own leadership in moving forward.
Oh, we've already begun. That process has already begun. I mean, the first thing
Okay.
was to take responsibility for the loss, and
So
offering
you've
my
taken responsibility for that.
I took responsibility and offered my resignation.
Okay.
Okay, and then I've gone up for another convention, and we have, again, based on history. And I mean, we don't have time, but United Workers' Party, for all intents and purposes, died as a party in 1997, when Sir John lost. George Mallet could no longer run in politics. Henry Giraudy died. And the United Workers' Party from 1964 to 1997 was a very successful coalition party. And it worked extremely well. Coalition in the sense that Sir John was always going to be the Prime Minister. Mallet was also going to be the Deputy Prime Minister. Henry Giraudy was always going to be the chairman of the party. And positions were already fixed. So there was really no internal context for those things. In a new modern democratic party between 1997 and 2006, the party never recovered. And it took Sir John coming back at the age of 82 to bring the party back into government, and we wasted that opportunity. But today, we have a group of men and women that have been in government, have been practicing governance, have experience. We have spent time together now in rebuilding the ideology and the direction of the party. And what we're now doing is adding additional structures to it, and then learning how to better communicate our point of view and getting back onto the ground, because it is in the constituency level. But we're in an era in which there seems to be less interest and less discussion about the social contract. How many people really understand what is a constitution? And that a constitution is a contract, an agreement between individual citizens of a country to empower an entity called the government of St. Lucia to serve us. And that entity, the government of St. Lucia, is made up of an executive, is made up of a legislator, is made up of the judiciary, and is made up of a bureaucracy called the government of St. Lucia. And what are the checks and balances that are put in place? And that our Bill of Rights, or our civil rights, our right for freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of conscience, right? Those things are put into the Constitution so that this superpower that we're creating called the government of St. Lucia cannot use its power or weaponize its power against the citizens of its own country. Now, when our institutions start failing us because they don't understand that simple principle, it means that we have to accept that maybe some of the things that we've adopted, the parliamentary system as an example, it's not working. So let's just take a simple thing. It's in St. Lucia, it's in Grenada. You have an executive and you have a parliament. The executive is supposed to write the laws. It's supposed to present budgets. The parliament is supposed to debate it. That's why boundaries is so important. Each boundary, each constituency is to be of equal representation. And a member of parliament represents not his party. He represents the people
The
from his constituency. And so
that's right.
therefore,
Yes.
when a bill comes to the House, he's to debate it from the perspective of the people from his constituency, which may differ from what the party believes. But you cannot expect a person who is in the executive, approves a budget or approves a law, to come to the House and debate it independently. Now, if in fact that's how it is, which it is, then it means the judiciary has to play a more significant role in making sure that those laws don't have any discretion, are very clear in what they're saying, and are not overly ambiguous. Because our constitutions are written in many ways with the expectations that the checks and balances are working, but they're not working. So, we don't spend enough time, to be honest with you, having those kinds of debates about our country and about the governance of our country and where we want to take our democracy and whether in fact democracy can work in the realm of one man, one vote in the context that we have. And until we spend more time having this civil discussion, I don't think that we're going to obtain the potential that these countries have. These should be the most aspired places to live in the world. We have some of the most creative people that I've ever met. We have a great joy of life. But sadly, that I'm seeing in many of our countries, St. Lucia in particular, that joy is being squeezed out of us because of how our country is being governed. And some of the basic rights that we have are being deteriorated, being taken away from us. And we seem to be paralyzed as to what to do about it.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Chastanet, I will offer you an opportunity for some closing comments. Thank you, sir, for agreeing on such short notice to appear on the Bob Report. Quite frankly, we were trying to track you down through other third-party contacts, but someone said, "May try this number to see if that would work." So thank you for responding to the call, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you here. We do hope to have you back. So let us talk about give you an opportunity for some closing comments, sir. In the context of everything that has happened with our Prime Minister's visit to Grenada, political leader of the NDC's visit to St. Lucia, and so on.
Your Prime Minister's young. I think it's hopefully an important lesson that he's going to learn, and hopefully the members of his own cabinet will learn. The question is, now that he's learned it, is he going to apply it in any particular way? And maybe achieve some things that other leaders were not able to achieve. I would also say to you that the discussion about citizenship is very important, and particularly in the context now that we have citizenship by investment programs in our countries. The reality is that when St. Kitts did the CIP in its initial stages, I argued way too late that the OECS government should have approved the programs before it was allowed to be implemented. And the reason is because the benefits of the CIP program include free access to our OECS countries. So as an example, while St. Lucia was not in the CIP program, persons who got citizenship in Dominica were allowed to come up and invest in St. Lucia and become residents in St. Lucia. And I would say to eventually be able to vote in St. Lucia. And if in fact that right is being passed on, then we should have had some kind of say. And your Prime Minister Gonzalez, who has always been very adamantly opposed to CIP, I said to him when we were going to go into it, is because we're already in it. Because persons who become citizens in the other OECS countries are getting
they
all
have
the
right
rights
to
and
free
privileges.
movement. They have
Right.
right to free movement.
Okay. And he kept on saying that there was some way that he was going to discriminate against those persons, but there's no way to discriminate. I want to say to you that the idea of saying that a person has to be born in our country in order somehow to discriminate against persons who have gotten citizenship through a different means, meaning purchasing their citizenship through the CIP program, would be considered to be discriminatory. Well, it wouldn't be discriminatory if in fact we applied, but it would mean that you have a dual standard of citizenship in your country. You have a citizenship standard for persons who are born in your country, and you have a citizenship standard for persons who were not born in your country and became naturalized. So does that mean now that England or Europe can say to you, okay, we're only going to give visa-free access to the persons that were born in Grenada? Which is exactly what was happening with our tax regimes, where they said that they were discriminatory tax regimes. So we're going to now have a discriminatory citizenship program. And it opens up a whole Pandora's box with whatever we're going to do. The next question becomes, it's a very interesting question. In America, you cannot be a US president unless you were born in America.
Natural born citizen, that's right.
But do you know why that came into being?
No, I have no idea. Absolutely
because
no idea.
When America had the war against not its civil war, but when it had its war of independence, afterwards you had British people who were still there. So they didn't want to see those British persons aspiring to office. And then what they fought for, they would have lost. Okay? But the political system that they have allows you to do that, because a president of America is elected nationally. So he's voted upon separately. Now, if he was going to say that you can be a member of parliament and not be born in St. Lucia, but you cannot be prime minister and you have to be born in St. Lucia. The way that we select our prime minister in our parliamentary system is by the political party that wins. And it's the MPs supported by their constituency branches that determine which person is the leader of your party. So I could be a constituency, my constituency is an example, could challenge that constitutionally, saying that I'm being discriminated, they're being discriminated against because they have an MP and that MP is not allowed to become the prime minister of the country. So it's fraught with problems. So this government is playing on the emotions of people rather than trying to build a proper democracy. And sadly, our civil society and a lot of persons you would expect that would come into the fray to be the protectors of our democracy, they're not. And that silence is hurting us. And a large part is because people have fear. But I'm so proud of the public of St. Lucia who have voiced their opinions so strongly that our prime minister threw your prime minister under the bus, because he came out 24 hours afterwards to say there's never been any discussion in his party as to going in this direction. And he doesn't know where that came from. So what it means is your prime minister took it upon himself to come to the country and attack a sitting leader of the opposition. For what reason? For what reason? So we all know that this is just hogwash. It's a very sad reality of our politics in our region. But I want to say to Grenadians, I want to say to all listeners throughout this region, we have bigger issues. Our wealth is being diminished every day by the inefficiencies of our own governments. And we have nobody to blame but ourselves, because the governments represent the people. And the idea of voicing our opposition to ideas doesn't mean you have to throw a government out, but a government has to listen to the voice of the people. And if in fact that we're not going to be given the opportunities of referendums, then the only way that persons have of having a collective voice is through demonstrations, whether it's petitions, whether it's marching, whether it's calling up on shows and writing letters, whether it's showing up in Parliament with placards and explaining and showing our condemnation to a policy that's going to be brought in. But it requires action. This idea that you can sit in your home and have a discussion and hold that disgust or your dissatisfaction internally is not going to solve the problem. And if we truly have a democracy, then we need to exercise it every day for it to work. If you don't practice democracy, it will never work.
If you don't practice democracy, it will never work. And on that note, Mr. Chastanet, thank you so very much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Viewers and listeners, Mr. Alan Chastanet, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia and the current leader of the opposition in that country, who leads a slim two-seat minority in the lower house of the St. Lucia Parliament. He was here to discuss developments with respect to a debate that is currently occurring in St. Lucia around birthright citizenship. Although the context of Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell's conversation did not address birthright citizenship, it addressed whether or not Mr. Chastanet lived in St. Lucia, and those who lived in St. Lucia should be the only ones running St. Lucia. But we are going to end our program today on the occasion of International Men's Day. International Men's Day is celebrated on November 19th every year to raise awareness about the health and well-being of men and boys, to highlight the issues that they face. They also celebrate the positive value of the man, that the man brings to the world and motivates them to become positive role models. The theme of this year's International Men's Day is Zero Male Suicide, a reminder of the disproportionately high rate of suicide among men. We are going to leave you with a musical tribute, a musical rendition from the Presentation Brothers College choir on the observance of International Men's Day. On behalf of the producers of the Bub Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. We thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of the Bub Report, and we will see you next week at the same time and the same place. Take care and goodbye.
Sanctuary.